Good morning and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today I am doing another of the occasional video series, Friends and Family. So far I've used that playlist to look at teas that I have been gifted by friends and family, either because they happen to have spotted something interesting or it's been a birthday or a Christmas gift, and we have a couple of those kinds of teas to look at. However, I thought I would look at a different kind of Christmas gift that I received from my wife this year instead of tea, and rest assured, she was good enough to buy me some tea. She also bought me as a complete surprise a portable tea maker, which is what we have here in front of us. This is the ZENS Portable PAI 3.0 tea maker, and it comes in, I suppose we would say, 3 or 4 parts. In terms of discrete units, a lid, the teapot, and here is the tea infuser, although really it's what allows the tea to drain out, and then the teacup underneath. This is in army green. We're going to be looking at it much closer in the second part of this video, and then we're going to look at reviewing the tea, and we'll discuss which tea we're going to be looking at as well. So let's move on to part 2, and then we'll test out this portable tea maker. See you in a moment. So here we are looking at the external packaging for the ZENS tea maker. This is the front. We have a logo here and tea maker here, and designed by ZENS, made in China. If I turn it this way, we've got a label down at the bottom. Let me make that a little more central. Pointing out it's the PAI portable glass tea maker in army green. There's details there about the box size, materials inside, and a preview, if you will, of the components within this packaging, which is the 2-part tea maker itself, or at least 2 discrete parts in that sense, and then the carrying case. So let's take a closer look inside. I'm just going to move this away from the camera for 2 seconds. I've tried to be accurate here and not actually take it out until we're looking. So here we have the carry case for the tea maker inside. You may not be able to see, but there's in indented letters we have ZENS, and the tea maker imagery from the front, that's also indented. We have a leather style, I'll say no more than that in case it isn't leather, carrying handle here. The zip begins here and goes all the way around, as you can see, coming down to, well, all the way down to there, all the way right round. And it's quite a thick carrying case, as we'll see once we actually open it. So let's do that now. Hopefully this won't look too sort of dizzying. So here we have the components for the tea maker in front of us. Now, the most important thing, and one that they do point out, is that this does not screw together. So it can't function as a flask. The teapot part here doesn't have a lid, so that can't be filled with liquid to carry around. And this part doesn't screw into that, so you can't reliably carry hot liquid around in this. This isn't a criticism, this is something that is mentioned in this sticker inside the carry case. So what we've got is, in terms of components, we've got an upper lid, we've got the teapot, this part is a tea infuser, and then we have the teacup. The rough carrying capacity of the teapot here is about 180 mils, and there is a maximum fill line, when I can find it, up to here. That makes sense because you've got to take account for leaves increasing in volume once they've rehydrated. This button here is the means by which the steeped tea, or any hot water for that matter, runs out of the teapot. And the way it functions is you have this permeable strainer here, and with a slight twist that comes out. Inside there is a ball bearing, And you might be able to see, if I bring it closer, at the bottom here, that little doohickey of plastic there is what is moved out by the button. So it's a nice simple design whereby the ball bearing is ultimately responsible for holding the leaves, holding the liquid in, and the strainer for keeping the tea leaves in. So that's how it basically functions. So it's a thick borosilicate glass as well. So it's pretty good at holding the heat in. So we're going to now go and try this teapot. We're going to try for a Western style brew, and then I'll give you some thoughts about it. See you in a mo. Hello and welcome to part 3 of our video, where we are going to road test our tea maker from ZENS. To that end, I have, as well as my kettle here, the temperature adjustable kettle, all set in urn mode. I have a tea for us to test. Now, I didn't think it was fair to try an unknown tea in our tea maker because I wouldn't know whether the tea maker was doing anything to influence the flavour or not, to bring out enough of the flavour, to bring out more of the flavour than usual. So to that end, I thought I would review a tea, or at least look at a tea that we have already tried, and that is the duck poop oolong, the Dan Cong duck poop oolong. Now, the reason we're doing that is because I don't think I did that tea justice when we did review it in its own video. I think, hand on heart, I used too much tea, too great a proportion of tea to water. So, given that the maximum volume for this is about 180 mils, I've weighed out 2 grams of tea, and that seems a much more realistic proportion. I'm also going to use my timer here, and we're going to give this tea 3 minutes, and that hopefully that isn't in danger of over steeping the tea, but allows us to have a sense of what it's meant to be like. So the other thought I had about this, we could preheat everything. That's why the jug is here. If I pour some water into, don't know why I'm doing that. If I pour water into here, I can preheat the teapot part, then I can let it pour into here and preheat the teacup part. It also gives us a sense for how long it takes to pour out. Now, I have tried a pour like this before when emptying, when there's nothing but water in, and I think I must have done something wrong because it took longer on that first run empty than it did filled. Then I tried it again and it was much shorter. So I perhaps didn't quite press or depress this button here that opens up the channel for the water. So we're going to, first thing we're going to do is we're going to see how long it takes to drain, just so that you've got some indication as well. So, whoops, that's it already pouring. Let's say that was 2 seconds. That was organised of me. So that's coming in at just under 15 seconds, 14.63. Even if we add a second for me and thought it would invert it, 14.63, let's call it 15.63, still under 17 seconds to empty. That's now heated. That's a little uncomfortable, but you're meant to hold it by the infuser. And it means that the double-walled bit at the bottom is heating. So let's get on with this. Quite a nice snug seal. It's not, doesn't have a, oh, it does actually have a slight rubber or plastic seal, but it's not difficult to remove. It's not lifting the teapot up with it. So here are our 2 grams of tea. And then let's get make sure I can see where the maximum line is. I'm sure eventually you can work it out by, I'm trying to make sure I can see where is the line? Oh, there it is. It was hidden by some condensation. Okay, so let's get, I'm going to give this 3 minutes. Right, I can see the max line a lot easier now. There's no condensation. There we go. I rather like the idea of being able to see the tea infusing in real time rather than having to take a lid off. Granted, you can do that with a large borosilicate teapot as well. So all we've got here is a miniature version. So one thing to remember is that this is a travel item in the sense that it's a small scale version of a teapot and a cup. It doesn't have much floor space. It doesn't take up a great deal of room. Footprint, that's the word. And it also occurs to me I have a smaller travel version of this temperature controlled kettle. It's about the same size as this actually. And because that was a gift, it might be worth a video on that as well. So those two things together, if you were at a desk or if you were on holiday, I didn't have this on my summer holidays. I only got it this Christmas, but I did have the travel kettle, and that was very good for the static caravans, effectively, or chalets that we were staying in. However, you still, if you want to be careful, you still need to measure out volume of water or the amount of tea. So what's the good thing with this is if you know it's 180 mils, then you can simply adjust the tea and always have 180 mils worth at a time. So that's only one thing you have to adjust. And if the tea you're using you're very familiar with and you know roughly what 2 grams or however much you need is going to look like for 180 mils of liquid, then you need even less equipment. So the other thing to point out, and I suppose it's an obvious thing, is it's flared towards the bottom so that it doesn't wobble, because the last thing you want is any hot tea. I can see a couple of vents in the lid, which I assume are there to release trapped steam. There's certainly one in the lid, which I assume is for that purpose. We've got 40 seconds left. The leaves are starting to plump up nicely as they rehydrate and to move around. This is still slightly warm from this water that we ran through it, but it hasn't, it's perfectly comfortable. That is really quite hot, but there's loads of finger room on the infuser part, so it can be carried with that. It also occurred to me that you could take this to the office kettle, fill it, and then bring it back to your desk, because that's quite stable as long as you're holding it carefully. And again, it doesn't even takes up even less. Oops. It has an even smaller footprint if you don't need to kettle with it. So let's see how this has fared as a teapot. So there's still a fair bit of room, but the leaves have steeped a bit. So this is 3 minutes for 2 grams of tea in 180 mils of water. Let's time, I don't anticipate any difference, but let's time how long it takes to drain. I presume it's going to be much the same as the amount of time when it was empty, unless it has to drain past or percolate through all the leaves. Still a few drips. That is 20.77 seconds. I'm sure you'll have to read it back to front for yourself, but let's say that's 20 seconds. 20 seconds for it to drain. I think that's probably too long for a gong fu session, where a few seconds at a time can make a difference, but it doesn't take up a lot of room in as a teapot for one, or I suppose you could share if you had smaller cups. That doesn't take up a lot of room. So, next question. Just to give it a shoogle, does it drip? It doesn't drip. So if you absolutely had to put it on a blotter or something like that, let my hands dry. I suppose you might get a bit of condensation, but that's it. I'm going to put it on the platter that I use for the tea there. Again, that's perfectly comfortable to hold, but it is double-walled. Now, you might be thinking, if it's double-walled, is much point in that if it's open to the elements at the top. I can say in advance, my wife uses a much smaller double-walled espresso cup. It only holds enough liquid for double espresso. And that's open on the top as well. And she has no problem with that staying warm for a good couple of minutes at a time. So I imagine that this would be much the same. And she's walking around courtyards and whatnot with hers. So that's comfortable. Let's see what the tea itself is like. So this is a sort of informal Western style brewing review of the duck poop oolong. Plenty of sweetness and definitely something floral. I think this is the one that they tried renaming honeysuckle. But needless to say, people were enjoying calling it duck poop too much. I think we did discuss that. It is steaming my glasses out, but that's hardly the tea's fault. I just don't want to burn myself. Still quite warm. Definitely floral. Smooth. Sweet. A good full flavour. It could probably do with a touch, ironically, it probably could do with a touch more tea or maybe a longer steeping. There's no bitterness. Flavour is dropping off slightly, but that's nothing to do with this system. Yeah, that's much better than the version with way too much tea, but probably need a touch more than that. So let's do a kind of summary of this. That's quite stable. It's flared. I mean, an accidental thump with my thumb isn't doing it any harm. There's a wee bit of condensation on this platter, but that's it. That started to cool to the point I can pick it up. That's still perfectly cool. Doesn't take up a great deal of room. That's still comfortable to touch. The liquid was still quite warm. The tea was still quite warm, so that's worked fine. 20 seconds, if that, to steep. 17 or so when it was empty. That seems pretty efficient to me. Probably too long, as I say, for gong fu, but if you're brewing this liquid, and I don't know if you're meant to be able to pour the same amount of tea into this again, but that looks to me as if it can't hold double. So maybe either don't fill it or you do one at a time. But of course you could re-steep the same tea. So if it's a good strong brew, something like a dark tea, there's no reason why you can't just put that back on and have another crafty steeping. So it works. It works perfectly fine. And I can see that as something I would definitely take on holiday with me, along with the kettle, which takes up about the same room. So if you can imagine double that, that's not too bad. You could fit that on a small holiday work counter somewhere, or kitchen counter. Is it the best of the bunch, this kind of device? I don't know. This is the only one I've tried because I was gifted this by my wife. It works absolutely fine. Is it the quickest? I don't know. That's cooled a little more. That's comfortable. It doesn't spill. It doesn't make a mess. It's comfortable. It's practical. I don't know what it cost, and I don't intend to look it up, and I wouldn't tell you if I did, because I don't do that when it comes to the teas. A thing is worth reviewing on its own merits. So look it up if you want to try it out. This is the ZENS PAI portable tea maker. I believe this is version 3.0. So I'm going to drink this tea in my own time. And in case you're wondering why I haven't got my collar on, I'm working from home today, and so I didn't see any need to put a collar on just to do a video. I wouldn't want it to come across like a gimmick. Anyway, that's enough havering. I do hope this has been of some interest and use to you, either to look closer at this particular tea maker or this kind of device at the very least. And it remains only for me to say happy steeping and God bless.